Hi friends, today we are going to be doing a February reading wrap-up. So I read, I think about 30 books this month. I'm going to try and do my best with this reading wrap-up. It might be long. I might miss a few points in some of the books, so I do apologize in advance. I will do my best to summarize the book as best as possible. Let's get into the books. The first book I have is The Love Lyric by Christina Forrest, and I gave this 4 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed the other books in this romance standalone series, and throughout the books we're following the Green sisters. This book we follow Iris, who I believe is the oldest, and she has a child from a previous marriage. Angel, who is our MMC in this book, he is an R&B singer. We learn about him and his background and where he came from and how he ended up being like one of the top singers. I would say this is like a forbidden romance, workplace romance situation, because Angel is a brand ambassador at a company that Iris works for, which I believe is a skincare company, and they have to go on this trip together, like a work trip. The company itself had some backlash in the past, so she wants to keep this as professional as possible. But that doesn't happen. It's probably one of my favorite books in the entire series, next to The Neighbor Favor. They kind of go in hand. I highly recommend you read the other books in the series too if you have not. Then we have The 7/10 Split by Carmen Lee. I believe I gave this a 3.5 stars. This is a sapphic, small town, friends to lovers, ex-friends to lovers romance. We meet Ava Williams, who works at the school in her small town, and then they find out that they're getting a new teacher, and it turns out to be Grace, who was her best friend way back when. Something happened in their relationship, they had a fallout, and they haven't seen each other or spoken to each other since. Ava really doesn't like Grace, like she pretty much hates her, and they have to work together because they coach this bowling team that is at the school. And there's a sense of rivalry and competition amongst each other, which I love when it comes to romances, especially when they don't like each other. I love when there's like a little competition because it definitely brings out a little bit more personality, and I'm obsessed with that. I never read a bowling romance, so I feel like this is a very unique but fun romance. There's also a second book that just came out. It's called The Relationship Mechanic. It takes place in the same small town, and we're following one of the characters that we meet in here. Then we have Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This is my second time reading this book, and it's still so good. This time around, I paid a lot of attention to actually the side characters because I haven't read This Could Be Us and Can't Get Enough. Is coming out in May, I believe. I wanted to pay more close attention to those characters so I can get an idea when I get into reading the next books. What I really enjoyed about this book was the conversation surrounding therapy. I go to therapy every week. I think it's super important. There's also grief and loss and trying to co-parent while you two are divorced, but also still have this sense of love for each other, but also trying to co-parent these two almost teenagers. I really enjoyed this book, and I highly recommend you read it too. Next we have Bemused by Farah Rashan, and I gave this book a 4 star. This was the cutest little young adult fantasy book, and this book follows the 5 muses from Disney's Hercules and their origin story. Throughout the book, they learn about their powers. They go on this really long journey and adventure to find their mother, as their mother gets taken at the beginning of the book. But the 5 of them really have to work together and figure out their magical powers, their magical abilities. What I really loved about the book is the camaraderie and the love amongst the 5 of them and how they all work together. I was a little hesitant in reading this book because I thought I was going to be very confused, but it almost teeters on the line of middle grade a little bit. It is categorized as young adult, but it does feel a little bit more of like a middle grade type of read, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Again, if you are a fan of Hercules and especially the 5 muses, because Talia, she's my girl, and I will stand on that. Next, we have The Symphony of Secrets by Brendan Slocum, and I gave this book a 4.5 stars. I will read anything this man writes. I read The Violin Conspiracy last year, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. This one, I thoroughly enjoyed. I could not put it down, and it's so fast-paced. So much happens throughout the book. This book, we're following Bren Hendricks, who is a music scholar, and he gets a call from the Frederick Delaney Foundation, and they're asking him to authenticate some music that they have found. Of course, Bren is jumping at the chance because he's also a huge fan of this composer. He starts to work on some of the music, and he realizes that there's these 2 initials that are at the corner of all of these pages, JR. Turns out it was Josephine Reed. Throughout the book, we get the present time with Bren and Ebony, who is Bren's friend, as they uncover the truth about Frederick Delaunay and this entire foundation. And then we also get the past events of what actually happened between Josephine Reed and Frederick Delaunay. There's a sense of rhythm a little bit in the writing that keeps you captivated and engaged throughout the story. If you love The Violent Conspiracy and haven't read this book, please pick this up. The next book I read was Technically Yours by Denise Williams. I gave this book 3 stars. This is a second chance workplace romance. We're following Pearl and Cord. And Pearl and Cord actually met in an elevator about 8 years ago, and then they broke it off. Cord ends up working for the same nonprofit that Pearl ends up working for. Cord ends up being a mentor to one of Pearl's family members. I really loved that relationship and that aspect of the book. I personally thought this book was a little slow. I will say though, despite the cover, this book was really spicy. Like, I was not expecting that much spice. Next we have Their Eyes Are Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, and I read this book back in high school, like a long time ago, and I decided to reread it and actually annotate it. We're following Janie as she goes through all of these different relationships with men and how it affects her as a woman in society. This still holds up. I think more people should be reading this book. This is also a banned book. Yeah, 5 stars. Then we have Another Brooklyn by Jacqueline Woodson, and this book follows August a couple of years later as she returns to her place in Brooklyn and runs into a longtime friend, and they reminisce about their time in the 70s in Brooklyn. Throughout the book, we get little vignettes about her time in Brooklyn with her close friends, how they met, and all the other things that was happening around her. What I really liked about this book was the writing style. I thought the writing was very beautiful. It is a short book. It is not long, but I did give this book a 3.75 star. The next book I have is Blackout by Danielle Clayton, Tiffany Jackson, Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon. And this book is composed of a bunch of short stories that are set around this big blackout that happens in New York City. There is stories about love, second chances, and looking at new possibilities. I really liked it. I will say that there is one storyline that kind of encompasses the entire book, but along the way there are also little short stories that happen as well. I love a good short story collection, and this one was really good. Next we have Charming as a Verb by Ben Phillip, and this is a young adult romance book, and I gave this book a 3.5 stars. It takes place in New York City, and we're following Henry, who is known as the Charmer, and he owns his own dog walking company. There's a whole big scheme around that. He also goes to this really prestigious school. He's also on the debate team, and his biggest goal in life is to attend Columbia University. And then we have Corinne Troy, who also attends the same school as Henry. Corinne is known as the very serious type, not really likable amongst her peers. Corinne finds out the truth about Henry's dog walking company, and she ends up blackmailing him and basically telling him, like, if you don't help me become a likable human being amongst my peers, I will tell everyone about your dog walking company. Of course, he ends up helping her, and they go to parties, they hang out a lot. Corinne actually starts to give Henry some really good advice about college. I love that it takes place and set in New York City. I really like this book because it wasn't the ending I was expecting, but I liked the ending. It made sense to me. You want like a fun, cute, one sitting type of situation, like this is the one. Alright, The Accidental Pinup by Danielle Jackson. I really wanted to love this book. Like, I really did, and I really tried, but I just couldn't get behind the romance. I really couldn't. I thought their relationship felt very disjointed at times. It just didn't feel like it was very consistent. I also wanted a little bit more of a rivalry between each other because Cassie, who is our FMC in this book, is a photographer, and she was supposed to be shooting this big campaign for her friend's like lingerie line, and because the friend is pregnant, she is on bed rest and can't do it, so she has to be the model. So they end up hiring Reed Montgomery, who is kind of known as a little bit of a player. In the beginning, Cassie already doesn't like him, so I was so excited when he got on set and was like ready to film and everything. Like as soon as he came in and she saw him, it was like, oh no, never mind. I wanted a little bit more of a tension build up. I just couldn't get on it. And I really wanted to love it. I really did. However, I am curious about the next book, which is called Accidentally in Love, because two characters from The Accidental Pinup are like the main characters in this book, and I liked them a lot. So I think I might pick up this one. The next book I have is another Christina Forrest book. This is Now That I Found Love, and I gave this book, I think, a 3.75 stars. So I was looking at a lot of the backlist, and this was on it, and I was like, ooh, I haven't read this one. In this book, we're following Evie Jones, whose grandmother is a very big actress, and long story short, her grandmother ends up leaving the business. Evie wants to follow in her grandmother's footsteps and become an actress. She ends up getting this really big job in this really big movie. It all gets taken away from her by just a drop of the hat. Basically something her best friend did. She ends up losing everything. She was trying to figure out a way to make everything better, and so the one thing that she could possibly do is actually go visit her grandmother to help her. Evie goes to New York City to convince her grandmother to go to this really big award ceremony that is actually honoring her. Grandmother doesn't want anything to do with it. When Evie does get to New York, she meets Milo, and Milo has been kind of living with Evie's grandmother for a very long time and helping her out and stuff, and Evie is not a big fan of him because she's like, who is this man and why is he in your house? But throughout the book, they start to form a bond and a relationship with each other. When I first started reading this book, I did not like the FMC. I thought she was self-centered, not taking in the consideration of like her grandmother's feelings or Milo's feelings when it came to certain things. But she did grow on me towards the end a little bit. But we heart Milo. We love Milo. Next, we have Their Vicious Games by Joelle Wellington, and this is a very popular book, I believe. This is a young adult thriller that surrounds this really big competition. Following Adina Walker, who attends this really prestigious school and she is on a scholarship. Long story short, Adina ends up getting into this really big fight, and it ends up leading to her losing her scholarship at one of the biggest schools that she wanted to go to. So in order to get back her spot, she decides to enter this competition called The Finish. And The Finish is supposed to be a way for one person to be able to attend whatever school they want and get the backings of the Remington family, which is a very wealthy family and a very influential family. She decides to enter the competition, but it's not the competition she thought she was getting into. People die. Like, people are killing each other. It's insane. I was zooming throughout the book. The ending, I wasn't expecting, but also wasn't shocked. If you liked like Ace of Spades, then you probably will enjoy this one. The next book I have is All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby, and this is, I believe, classified as horror or thriller. I'm not 100% sure, don't quote me on it. I gave this book 5 stars. So in this book, we're following Titus, and he is actually the first Black sheriff in this very small racist town. So he gets a call about a former student killing his teacher, and when it happens, Titus does this big investigation and realizes there's some underlying things going on here. There's a reason why this man did what he did. Throughout the book, we get to meet all of these characters that live in this small town. There's so much tension, and not just with the main character, but also you feel it throughout the book. All of this tension just constantly rising as you read amongst the people in the town and him and his relationship with people. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I will be continuing to read more S.A. Cosby books from now on. He is now my new author, and this book was just really good. And by the way, I did read this and borrow it at the library, and this is, I had to buy my own copy. I just could not do it, you know? Next, we have Someday Maybe. I had this book on my shelf for such a long time because people said it's really sad, and it is. This entire book is her grieving and her grieving process and what it looks like and how it affects the people around her, her relationships. You know, she loses her job, she almost loses a friend. You can definitely tell that the mother-in-law, or her husband's mother, I should say, really does not and did not like our FMC in this book. You can tell just by the way they like talk to each other and communicate. but they're both grieving, which I think is very interesting because we get to see both of these characters grieve so differently. Our main character, she ends up going on her own type of journey, and then we get to see her mother-in-law as she kind of takes everything out on her. It's pretty depressing. I think I gave this book a 3-star. It was interesting, the writing was good, the pacing was just kind of slow. The next book I have is The Sun Sets in Singapore, and I gave this book, again, 3 stars. It was solid, it was good, but it wasn't amazing. This book follows 3 women that are part of this book club, and they all live in Singapore. And this one man comes in and just disrupts the group dynamic. We get to see all of the things that they dealt with in their past life, all the things that they're dealing with now, and how, you know, they're going to reconcile with it. For example, one of our main characters, she and her mother have a very hard relationship with her father's side of the family. They don't get along very well. Our other main character, who is trying to become partner at the firm that she's been working for. There's a lot of drama that happens throughout this book, especially surrounding these Black women who live in Singapore. It was fine. This Cursed House by Del Sandine. I believe this is considered horror. So we're following our main character, Gemma. She just lost her job as a teacher, and out of the blue, she gets offered, she thinks, a tutoring position at this house. So she ends up taking the job from the Duchamp family that live in New Orleans. She jumps at the chance because the money looks good. I don't have to pay for a place to live. I'm living in there. It's great, right? She gets to the house and it's already, something ain't right. It don't feel right. It don't look right. Something is wrong here. And when she gets there, there's a lot of truths that are revealed about the family and her relationship with the family. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Again, this was a very fast pace for me personally. This book was insane. This book was crazy. It was wild. I had a good time. This was my nonfiction pick of the month, and this is Master of Me by Keke Palmer. I thought this was a memoir, but it's actually a self-help book, which I don't mind self-help, but I was looking forward to a memoir. We do get aspects of Keke Palmer's life and a few things that she dealt with behind the scenes, but nothing too like explicit or crazy. It's really just a self-help book I recommend for people who are wanting to start in the entertainment business or don't know where to start, or the advice that I wish when I started dancing and performing. Like, I wish I got this advice growing up. She talks about the entertainment industry. She talks about owning your power and owning who you are. This was fine. Skyfall Elephants by Sibo Campbell. Give me more. Oh my gosh, this was incredible. I read this in one sitting, could not put it down. So this book takes place at a time where white people are gone. We're following our main character, Charlie, who was in prison, and when this big event happened, they all get out. He has a job as a teacher and he's teaching. One day he gets a call from a girl who we find out is his daughter, and she's like, I need help. I need someone to take me to my aunt Agnes, I think her name is. He learns on the phone that this is his daughter and he needs help, so he goes to her and helps her out. And they go on this very long journey. And I forgot to mention also that her mother is white. We get to see a little bit of her being by herself for the first time with no family around. Her stepfather, her brothers, her mother are all gone, and it's just her. And she finds a connection with her father, and they go through this very long journey together of learning more about each other's worlds. I think his daughter learns more about her Black side of the family and the things that they have dealt with, because again, she's grown up with white people surrounding her entire life. It's a good one, very thought-provoking, highly recommend. Then we have A Caribbean Heiress in Paris by Adriana Herrera. I was really excited about this book because I am a sucker for a good historical fiction. I thought it was like, okay, like I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. So we're following Luz, whose father owns a rum company, and in order for it to be passed down to her, she has to be married. So she ends up marrying this Scottish guy. They end up actually falling in love with each other, but he's also hiding something from her. But I think I gave this 3 stars. Sugar Baby by Celine St. Clair. I thought this was horror, but it is not. This is a literary fiction book, and we're following our main character, who at first is a cleaner. She cleans houses for rich people, and she cleans a house for this very wealthy girl, ends up persuading our main character to become a Schmex worker. I think my issue with this book is my issue, like, it's on me, because I went into this thinking that this was a horror book, and it's not. I think I might reread it now since I have an idea as to what the book is about, but thought this one was okay. Let's talk about this book right here. This book right here, so good. This is Blood at the Root by Ladarian Williams, and I wish more people would talk about this book because it is incredible. If you are fans of Legendborn, Bloodmarked, like, you would be obsessed with this book. And I believe this is supposed to be a 3-book series. Let's talk about it. In this book, we're following our main character, Malik. Has had a pretty hard upbringing. His mother was taken away from him. He was in and out of foster care. At a very young age, he also learns that he has these magical abilities. He ends up meeting his grandmother for the first time, and he learns about his magical abilities, where they came from, you know, his mother, a little bit more about his mother through his grandmother. They end up enrolling him at Cayman University, which is a magical HBCU, and it's the first time that he gets to experience people like himself to really train his magical abilities. I really enjoyed this book. The writing was incredible. The storyline, the way it was told, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I gave this 5 stars. If you loved Legendborn, you will like this book. Next, we have a graphic novel. This is a young adult graphic novel called Hovergirls by Geneva Bowers. I felt like the plot was a little bit all over the place, in my humble opinion. However, the graphics in here are pretty cool. It was fine. Oh my god, we're almost done. Yay! Next, we have Pride by Ibi Zoboi, and I gave this book, I believe, a 4-star. This book is a Pride and Prejudice modern remix retelling. In this book, we're following Zuri, who lives in Brooklyn and takes very big pride in her family heritage. And one day, she looks across the street and she sees that a new family moves in, and it is the Darcy family. And her sisters go across the street to introduce themselves. Immediately, Darius and Zuri don't like each other, and I'm like, okay, there's the Pride and Prejudice plot. I like this, I like this, I like this. When Janae and Ansley meet, Ansley being Darius's brother, they already kind of liking each other. And I was like, okay, Jane, all right, I like this, I like this, I like this. I really enjoyed this book. There's a sense of growth amongst the two of them too, Darius and Zuri, I should say. I love that we got to look at the family dynamic a little bit. Like, this was good. It was a solid read. Taming Cain by Tessa Stone. The spice in here was so spicy. This is a paranormal dark romance. She is spicy, and I'm here for it. And a wolf? Bet. And it's also not that long. This is also, I believe, a first book in a paranormal series. I don't think you can see it, but it is on my shelf. I have the other 2 books, and I'm excited to continue on. I feel like if I explain to you what the book is about, I'm going to spoil it, so I will say I did enjoy this. Next, we have Somebody's Wife by Robbie Renee, and this book follows Gemma, who is in a very terrible marriage. Like, her husband cheated on her and she just wants a divorce. She also has a daughter who's in college, I believe. But then we meet our MMC. His name is Zeke. He ends up working at the same college that Gemma works at. And Gemma and her husband also work at the college. So they all work together, which brings so much tension to the story. There was one moment when I think they were all in a meeting and all 3 of them were in one room, and I was like, oh my god, this is so awkward. Zeke and Gemma really hit it off. They talk to each other through messages. When he finally starts working there, they start forming this really close-knit relationship. We get to see the ins and outs of Gemma and her husband's relationship and how toxic and terrible it is. I don't particularly like the cheating trope, but this worked for me. So I did my reread of Legendborn, and then last night I finished Bloodmarked. This is probably going to be a 6-star series for me, and I pre-ordered Oathbound like 3 weeks ago or something, so it should be here on March 4th, so I'm hoping to get to the 3rd book. I don't really want to talk too much about this series because I don't want to spoil it for anybody, But wow, fast-paced. I could not put the book down. There is so much that goes on throughout these books. And for the people that are like, Nick, Selwyn, and Bree, like, who's it going to be? I like all three of them. All three of them together in this really close-knit friendship. I love the world building. I love the characters. Oh, William? Protect William at all costs. Miss Tracy Deonn, please don't make me cry. William is one of my favorite characters, and if anything bad happens to them, I will sob. Please? The next book I have on this list is A Walk in the Park by Rebecca Witherspoon, and I actually listened to this on Audible. I don't think there's a physical book. I think that's just an audiobook. But this book follows our FMC and our MMC, who both go to adopt a dog, and they end up adopting the same dog, all on the mistakes by the adoption agency, and they end up having to co-parent this dog together. It's super cute, fun read, very quick read. I think it was like a 3-hour audiobook, but it's very cute. Highly recommend if you want something fluffy or a little palate cleanser in between books. This one's a good one. The next book I have on this list is The Good Ones Are Taken by Taj McCoy. I gave this book a 3.5 stars. I thought this was very cute. We're following our main character, Maggie. She's got out of a very terrible relationship with this guy, and her best friends are getting married, and she needs a date to the wedding. She goes on all of these dates, and none of them are looking good. But she has a close friend, Garrett, and they've been best friends since college years. He's trying to help her. She starts to date this doctor who she met at the gym with. They start dating and talking, and she is also really interested in him. There are some things about the doctor that is a little bit suspect, but nothing like too crazy. When their relationship starts to form, Garrett starts to get a little bit jealous, okay? And so Maggie has to decide whether or not she is going to continue the relationship with the doctor and how it will affect Garrett, or she will go with Garrett and see how it will affect their friendship. I really like this book. I also enjoyed the friends in this book. I thought they were really funny, and the banter between all three of them was hilarious. This was a cute, short romance. Recommend, again, if you need a palate cleanser, this is a good one to pick up. And the last book I read for the month of February was Can't Let Her Go by Kiana Alexander, which I talked heavily about in a reading vlog where I read romance books for Valentine's Day, and that was one of them. So if you want to go ahead and see my initial thoughts on them, definitely check out the video. But I gave this book, I believe, a 3.5 stars. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know this was a long one. I know I talked for a very long time, but if you did like this video, I would love if you would like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the notification bell so that you know when I post. Anyway, keep on reading, y'all.